Complete Terraria arrow guide. Let's go. The most basic arrow is the wooden arrow, which doesn't have any special effects and only does 5 damage with a velocity of 3. The flaming arrow is another early game arrow that applies fire to your enemies, dealing damage over time as well as dealing 7 damage with a velocity of 3.5. Next is the bone arrow, which is pretty bad, however it does pierce through 2 enemies, which is a bonus, and deals 8 damage with a velocity of 3.5. Next, we have frostburn arrows, which are a better version of flaming arrows, applying the frostburn debuff that deals more damage over time and deals a base damage of 7 with a velocity of 3.75. Next is the jester arrows, which are very good and can destroy early game bosses, as they have the best piercing in the game as well as dealing a decent 10 damage with a velocity of 0.5. Up next is the unholy arrows, which are another good early game arrow with piercing, however I prefer the jester arrows as they can pierce infinite targets, however these can only pierce up to 5. This arrow has a base damage of 12 and a velocity of 3.4. The last pre-hard mode arrow is the Hellfire arrow, which creates a small explosion on impact and damages nearby enemies. This arrow is debatably the best pre-hard mode arrow, dealing 13 damage with a very good velocity of 6.5. Getting into the hard mode arrows, we have the unholy arrow. This arrow is pretty decent as it drops a star on the enemies that can deal pretty good damage as well as having a base damage of 13 and a velocity of 3.5. Next is the cursed arrows, which is a better version of the flaming and frostburn arrows, dealing more fire damage as well as dealing 17 base damage with a velocity of 4. The crimson counterpart to the cursed arrows are the Ica arrows, which apply one of the best debuffs in the game, which lowers an enemy's defense by up to 15, making you deal massive damage. This arrow has a base damage of 16 with a velocity of 4.25. Next, we have the chlorophyte arrows, which are pretty cool as they bounce off walls up to 3 times, making them pretty good. They deal 16 damage and have a velocity of 4.5. Next, we have the venom arrow, which is an extremely powerful post-plant era arrow that applies venom to enemies, dealing massive damage over time and has a base damage of 19 with a velocity of 4.3. Last but not least, we have the best arrow in the game, the Luminite arrow, which is a post-Moon Lord arrow that shoots 3 extra projectiles after every time you shoot, dealing massive piercing damage. This arrow has a base damage of 15 with a velocity of 3. Follow for more.